Hello and welcome to another episode of Conversations at the Summit, brought to you by Climb UK, where we talk to people from every aspect of business, but in a language that you'll understand. I'm Tanya Arnold, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about a subject very close to our hearts, investing in the North.
There's a whole bunch of amazing businesses in the North that I think are overlooked. Liverpool in particular is often overlooked as a tech hub, or has been in previous years. It's now really gathering some momentum. It's a passion to really help these underserved geniuses that are building these businesses of the future. A week doesn't go by where I meet particularly first-time founders, and they'll tell me something, and I'll say, "How have you arrived at that conclusion?" And they'll say, one of our advisors told us. And it'll be so irrelevant to what the company is trying to do. It's always a bloke who's very overconfident that says, what you want to do is da-da-da-da, and they're in and out in 5 minutes, but everybody hangs off their every word. And there's just so much naff advice going on.
Well, joining us is Martin Sutton, a man with many job titles, which we'll get to in a moment, and also with us, as ever, is Gordon Bateman from Climb. Now, Martin, before joining the investment side of things, which is what you do now, you've had many jobs, scaled many businesses. Take us back to the beginning. Where did it all start with you?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, Tanya. Great to be here. First of all, it started about 25 years ago, which makes me sound like I'm about 300 years old, which isn't far from the truth. But I started in a tech business around about the dot-com time in a business called Sun Microsystems, which is an amazing silicon-based tech business that went on and was bought by Oracle. That's kind of where my entry point for technology began. And then from then, I've worked with worked for a number of leading global tech businesses, 4 to be precise, big corporate companies, scaling all sorts of technology teams, and then entered the world of startup in 2015.
Where did the passion for tech come from then?
I've always been somebody that's keen on progression and solving problems. I think tech is a brilliant enabler for problem solving, and most of the things that occur in business today and in life can be enhanced by tech if they're applied correctly. So I think I've always been a nosy Parker. I still am. People call it curiosity, and I like solving problems, and tech plays a key part of that.
A good business to have been in as well in the last 25 years, because it's evolving at such a rate. There's an awful lot to be nosy about.
Yeah, there is. And I think if you're nosy, and I'd like to think myself as driven, there's no better place than tech, because there's always something else coming along that's going to speed up the world and going to make life better for people. And if you can spot that wave and spot that trend and be part of it, then you're having a great time and a great job.
And some of this, Martin, you were fair time in corporate world, and then you say you go into startup world. What was that what made that transition? Why did you do it? And then what was it like?
Yeah, so the transition was easy and hard. So the reason for the transition, I was working at a big global tech business called EMC. A lot of people haven't heard of EMC, but they were acquired by Dell for 67 billion, just to give you an idea of their scale. And I worked in this really interesting team called Emerging Technology. So what we did in that team is, as a business, we acquired startups, and then it was our job to repackage these startups and take them to market. And the last gig I worked on, which was also the most successful, was with an Israeli startup called Extreme.io. So we bought a pre-revenue business. We worked on them for about 18 months to build their go-to-market and do some sort of pilot testing. We took them to market, and within 18 months, we'd done $1 billion of revenue. And it was at that moment, I like my bug for the startup world just went on steroids. And I thought, I'm in love with this. I want to drop this corporate gig. And basically, I left without a plan. I sort of said, I need to go and figure out the next phase. And the only way I can do this is not to be in an all-immersing company like EMC. So I did a short sabbatical. And by sheer accident, which we can come on to, I went to an event. Like events have always played a major role in my career. And I met a founder of a business, and I offered the fatal words of, I really like your business, I think I can help. And then I spent the next 6 years with them at Peak AI. So the transition, I had a very good view of what was coming. But actually joining a 5-person company, which is what PKI was back in 2016, there's a lot of differences, and a lot of people can't make that transition from corporate to startup. I was very fortunate that I just loved it and would never go back.
What are those differences, Martin? Having done that and also seen it from your investment portfolio, what are the differences?
Yeah, there's a couple of key ones really. Pace plays a massive role in it. Like the pace of a startup is way faster than a corporate. The way decisions get made, the way things are changed on the fly. One of my least favorite words, but I'm going to have to use it, is pivot. People always talk about, I pivoted. That means they just got it wrong and changed their mind. So there's a lot of that goes on in the startup world. So if you can't handle ambiguity and you like certainty, you will fail. And I learned that the hard way, because I hired some people quite early on into my role at Peak that came from the corporate world, and I just thought everybody could make this transition because everyone was the same, and a few people really struggled. So ambiguity and pace are the two big ones. And then there was a great bit of advice that somebody gave one of our new starters when we were at Peak. They'd been here about 3 or 4 months, and they just said to the team, is there anything that I should be thinking about? Like, if I was to look back in 6 months' time, give me one lesson that I need to have taken on board. And this person said, I've been here 12 months. Don't get upset if your life's work or the important thing you're working on gets completed to a high level, but by the time you've completed it, everybody in the business says, that's brilliant, but we're not doing that anymore, so we're going to put it in the bin. And I remember that thinking, yeah, that's really true, actually, because you go through many, many iterations at pace and get a lot of things wrong, so you've just got to be able to move on.
And what did you take, though, from being part of a big corporate organisation and being part of that big structure? Are there things that you took from that have helped, or actually was it a completely different world and you had to park it?
No, a lot of good learnings. I think structure, discipline, process are things that need to be applied to the startup world. So, for example, just to pick one, I'm a huge advocate. I've always been on the sales side of business. And I'm a huge advocate of sales methodologies. I think sales is a science, not an art. And there are some brilliant methodologies that you can apply to sales processes that increase your chances of success. And it's things like that you learn in a corporate where there's a high level of discipline and rigor that you then bring into a startup at a very early stage. And you go, we need to apply this now, because as we scale, if we don't, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. So yeah, and the other thing that's always been really useful to me, which gave me the benefit of getting into the startup world sort of almost 15 odd years into my career, is your network. A very wise person once said to me, whatever you're looking for, the answer's normally in your network. So I was able to use my network a lot that I developed in the corporate world, mainly from customers. So a lot of my customer networks and friends I was able to go back to as the startup and rekindle those relationships and work with them again in a startup.
Gordon is nodding along here to all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. We do a piece of work where we bring corporate leaders to work with startup leaders. And the original plan back in the 90s was to help the startups. What we found actually was the entrepreneurial leadership transferring the other way as well. And what people worked out, exactly what you said at the beginning of this, was actually startup world isn't for me. A lot. It can look very intriguing and very fun from the outside, can't it? But it is relentless as well.
It's interesting, actually. I've interviewed hundreds of people to come and join the startups that I've either worked in or I'm advising. And you hear the same thing being said over and over again. You go why do you want to join a business at our stage? And normally the answer is, I want to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, and I want to be able to put my mark on something and do something that I'm really passionate about. And I go, that's great, and you'll get that opportunity. But don't overlook, you'll also be under the microscope, because if there's only 10 of us here, and this goes wrong and you're running sales, you're the person we're going to come to for why is it not working? And I think people see the rosy side, but don't think about the downside.
And it's interesting as well, you talked about process. As an organisation gets, at the beginning it is everyone does everything. I remember in Climb in 2023, we interviewed a woman called Jennifer Burns. She was the CTO of Microsoft. And she said when she was in a corporate, she did nothing. When she went to a startup, she had to do everything. And she realised to scale it, she had to get back to doing nothing as fast as physically possible. Yeah. and some people resist that. When the process starts going in, they resist it, don't they? They're great when it's that kind of nebulous, do everything. But when you get the process, how did you find it at peak, putting that process in?
So you do it in waves, don't you? So kind of like day dot, when you're sub 10 person company, you are doing everything and you have to do everything to the point you've just mentioned. It's when you start acquiring or hiring a team. Mm-hmm. I found the hardest bit, the hybrid between the two. So I call it like a player manager role, where if you're in sales, you're typically either selling or you're running the team. But as you're scaling a startup, you're doing both. And it gets really hard. And I spoke to so many people who've been through that transition, and they say it's like the hardest leap off point to actually stop the hands-on day-to-day selling, if that's your role or whatever your discipline might be, and actually relinquishing it to the team. I did it out of necessity versus I wanted to do it, because I like to be very hands-on, and I always feel I'm most comfortable when I'm with customers. But I quickly learned we were going to die, or I was going to die and be replaced unless I evolved. And we were really fortunate that we hired a really accomplished COO who is very structured, very process, very disciplined. And I learned like so much from her about how I could become more of an operator and less of a doer. So it was a transition that isn't easy. But you have to want to do it, and I think that's the difference. I meet a lot of people in the sort of scale-up world who maybe isn't part of the founding team, who resist. They don't want to do that. They don't want to become the operator, the person that runs, the orchestrator. They actually want to be in the weeds. And I think that's also an interesting point, because not everybody will make that transition. And I think you have to be realistic and go, you can stay doing that role, but we're going to have to bring somebody in above you, founder, to be able to run the team. Some people like that. Some people are scared of it.
But that's about the value you bring as an investor now when you're working into that market, because people won't diagnose that for themselves. You need that extra. And having, one of the things in the venture world, particularly in the regions, isn't there's not a lot of people who've been in companies that are now investing. But I think that's hugely valuable advice of do what you're good at and stick at it.
Yeah, it is. And I think... having seen that pattern across many businesses, including the ones I've worked in, it becomes very obvious very quickly who you think can make that transition and who you can't. Mm-hmm. And it's really good as an investor to have that conversation quite early on and say, look, you're going to scale this, and this is going to be mega successful. What do you want to be doing in 12 months' time? Do you want to be running a team of 10 people, or do you want to be delivering projects to customers? And I think it's good to have that chat and get people thinking about it as early as possible. Versus, we've decided you're not in the right job. Move over, please. Meet your replacement. I mean, as an investor, you could never do that anyway, and you shouldn't. But you get the gist.
So when did you switch sides, going from being part of that scaling and being in the business to joining a company to invest in businesses?
So I joined an investment company, River Capital, in December. I'm really bad with years. 2 and a bit years
ago. You and me
so
both.
23,
they just merge.
Yeah. Yeah, and then people go like, "What year were your kids born?" I have to get my fingers out and do it all back.
That's the one I can do is when
yeah. In fact, a quick funny anecdote. This is going to paint me in a really bad light, but I'm going to tell you anyway. My wife was resetting her passcode on her iPhone recently, and I had the phone in my hand, and I said, "What 6 numbers do you want?" And she gave out these 6 numbers, and I typed them in, and I typed them in again. I said, "What is this number? What's the significance of this?" And she just looked at me. She said, "That's the day we got married." I was like, "Oh, great."
I can do the day we got married. I can't do the year. I have to do it.
It was the year that threw me. I was like, "What is this?"
I'm with you. I'm with you all the way, Martin.
I think within the next 5 minutes after this podcast recording is finished, you need to change your passcode again, because somebody out there will work it out.
Yeah, good point. Actually.
Sorry, it's the wife's phone. He's all right. He's fine.
Too much in cyber at the moment. But yeah.
So let's go back to where we were, which is the switch to you becoming an investor.
Yeah. So kind of happened by sort of accident. But it's weird, isn't it? So, I don't know how you go through life, but I normally have a good idea of where I want to go and the path I want to be on, but I'm missing the steps. And sometimes the steps just appear. And I remember being at a trade show with Peak back in whatever year, being grilled by investors, and I turned to Rich, our CEO at the time, and I said, "I've realised what I want to be when I grow up." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "An investor." And so I always had this thing in my mind that I wanted to transition, and at the heart of what I want to do is help people. So I'm really passionate about helping first-time founders navigate this scale journey, because it's really hard. And a lot of people were kind of to help me. So I was like, I want to help people on this scale journey. Funding plays a really key part. I want to get into funding. And as I was having those thoughts, as luck would have it, I got a phone call out of the blue from an amazing guy called David Walters, who is the investment director at River Capital. And he said, "We're setting up the North's first dedicated AI fund, given your background. Would you be interested?" And I remember just saying, "Yeah, I'm in. I don't need to know the terms. I'm in. When do I start?" And that was it, really. And that was the start of the transition, looking at the world from this side of the fence.
Just before we talk about what you're doing and investing in the North, I'm interested, you'll be surrounded by investors. How many have got the experience that you've got, and how important do you think that experience is to have been at the coalface, so to speak?
Yeah, so not many that I come across, and you'd probably expect me to say this. I'd say it's critically important. One of the main reasons I wanted to work for and with River Capital is that we are a small team of ex-operators. So David Walters, who runs the funds, an ex-CTO that's had multiple exits. So we have a completely different view, I think, and we behave very differently to other investors, to the point where I always say to startups when we meet them, like, how many investors have you walked through this pitch deck with and met? And if they say sort of 5 or 6, I say, right, well, I'm going to just try and reset expectations. You're probably going to think we behave a bit oddballish, because we're going to ask questions that maybe have not been asked before, and we're going to be very excited about things that maybe others aren't. And the context of that is, and this is generic, I'm not saying all investors are like this, but when I sit in the same room as other investors and we're evaluating the same businesses, their homework or their way of diligence is largely through spreadsheets and numerical data, which is great, and we all do that. Mine is typically more into the weeds of the business and the people and the founder-led fit and the mission and everything else that goes on around that. I'm not saying other investors don't do it, but I'd say we really emphasize on the team and the reason they're there and why they are there to solve this problem, like why them and how can we help them, where are the gaps? And then if all that stacks up, then we'll spend time going through the spreadsheets and the financial forecast, but we don't do it the other way around.
It's interesting because we take a lot of companies over to the US as well as they expand, and that's a very US investor model as well. Often they don't even ask for the financial data until quite late into the process. It's about the team, the people, the business, the ambition. And I think that's because a lot of the investors over there are operator-led as well. They've come from industry as well.
Yeah, and I just think if you've worked in businesses, you know, for a number of years, and I always think if you know what great looks like, you kind of know what you're looking for next time round. And I've been very lucky. I've played minor roles in amazing teams, so you get a front row seat to see what greatness looks like. So when you see another team with those sort of characteristics, you can tell immediately. You're like, well, there's something in this. There's something going on here. I can feel it. So yeah, that's kind of how we do it.
And the North.
The North.
Why did they want it specifically for the North, and how much did that excite you?
Yeah, so it was a condition of our fund for River Capital that it had to be northern based. We're headquartered out of Liverpool, but we've got offices around the North. We have a passion to sort of make a difference in the North, particularly around Liverpool. Not just Liverpool, but Liverpool in particular is often overlooked as a tech hub, or has been in previous years. It's now really gathering some momentum. For me personally, it was massive because I always felt that. So Peak, who I've referenced a few times, we're headquartered in Manchester, and we were very proud of it. And most VCs, I wish I had a stat to back this up, but I'm gonna sort of say it's 85%, 90% of all VC investment in the UK takes place in the south, London or around sort of Cambridge. And there's a whole bunch of amazing businesses in the north that I think are overlooked by VCs. And it's really hard. Like I've been there myself. We've been there trying to raise money in the north, and there aren't that many there aren't that many VCs with experience that can help. So yeah, it's a passion to really help these underserved geniuses that are building these businesses of the future.
I think you're right. The reason why I created InvestLadder and what became Climb, or what has become Climb, is to build that bridge. And you've seen that. You've talked about trade shows, and we can get into that another point. I think what's also important, you're right, the money is in London and the South East, and it's hard for them to navigate the region. So having people like yourselves and River here, it's not just having local money, it's that bridge that speaks the same language to connect into that national, international network. And I think one of the things that I've seen challenging in the North is a lot of the resident investors here aren't hooked into that national network either.
Yeah.
So, which makes it even harder.
There's definitely a difference, I see it, between the companies looking for investment in the North versus those in and around London. And I've heard others say this as well. This isn't a stereotypical North-South thing. I've lived and worked in London for years. I love it. But the people in the North, the founders in the North, just seem more realistic and more open to what they're trying to do, and seem keener to accept help, which I think suits our fund a lot better because of our ex-operator nature. Whereas when I meet a startup in I'm going to say the South, that's quite generic, they seem to want to convince me that they've got all the answers for everything and don't need any help, which kind of makes us like, okay, well, don't really think we're the fit for you, because we're like helping. Like, this is not just about money. This is about how we can help you scale. And if you've got everything sorted, then good luck to you. Go and find somebody who just wants to give you the cash.
Do you think that's a personality trait, or do you think that's because the North has been underserved, so it does know it needs help?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? I don't know the exact answer, but it's got to be steeped in culture. Because if you go as far away as possible, if you go over to California, so if you go to the West Coast of the US, you meet the most exuberant, confident, big thinkers. So they're at one end of a spectrum, in terms of, I've got this startup, I've just had the idea, it's worth $1 billion already, like, give me 100 million and we'll get going, sort of thing. Like, they have this real think big attitude. If you come across to the East Coast, to sort of New York, it gets watered down with a lot more realism. And then if you come across to the UK, it gets more realistic again. And so, like, if you go like crazy ambition on the West Coast, a little bit watered down on the East Coast, then you get to London, it gets watered down again from the East Coast of America. And then you come north, it gets watered down again. So it's just a cultural thing. I think it's just how as people we exist maybe in our everyday worlds that makes us think the way we think.
Yeah, I think there's also an element of the best investors in the regions tend to be more than money. It's not just about the cash. Whereas when you've got bigger funds, maybe nationally, they peddle not peddle the message, but they promote the message: we're here to give you money and access, and that's it. So maybe there's an expectation also from the fund managers that if you're not the finished article, you're not got everything around you, they haven't got the time to help. But it is interesting, because one of the reasons why we created Climb is helping those business owners and those business leaders find that help, because it's also become really noisy in the market. It scares me how many people have not run businesses. They've read a book and are now advising founders how to grow a business. And
yeah. Don't get me started on that, Gordon.
You can see that touch of nerve literally as it came out of Gordon's voice.
I always said to people, look, I've got a lot of opinions. It doesn't mean any of them are right. But I'll tell you when I don't have a strong opinion about something. But a week doesn't go by where I meet particularly first-time founders, and they'll tell me something, and I'll say, how have you arrived at that conclusion? And they'll say, one of our advisors told us. And I'll be thinking, as they're saying to me, I'll be thinking, this is what you've been advised to do is absolutely insane. And I'll say, what's the background of your advisor? And it'll be so irrelevant to what the company is trying to do, but somebody's come in very confidently, and it's always a bloke, right? It's always a bloke who's very overconfident that says, what you want to do is da-da-da-da, and they're in and out in 5 minutes, but everybody hangs off their every word. Yeah. And there's just so much naff advice going on.
When I first started working with early stage businesses, and I left my own business to do this exclusively, people said, Gordon, you're an idiot. Founders are a nightmare. They've got no money. They're constantly changing things, and it's really hard. And they were absolutely right. But unfortunately, now it's become fashionable. So people who can't get the gig in a big corporate will then, where the money is and where it's an easy life, they kind of, I'll sell to these founders, I'll sell to these businesses. Because I can say this now because I am one myself, is founders tend to be gullible. And if someone's got a big badge that says I'm X, whatever, or it's been supported by Y, they fall for it. And it's one of the things, my biggest soapbox is really do your due diligence on anyone you're bringing into your business, whether it be an advisor or an investor.
100% agree. I don't know why, but I was thinking about this exact subject this morning for some reason. I don't know why. And I actually visualized it. It's a bit like somebody coming into a room and they have all the war medals across the chest. So you can't see my hands. And it's a bit like going, one says IBM, the next one says Accenture, the next one says whatever, and they have this big list of medals hanging off the shoulder, and because of that, they get a seat at the table, and because of that, they're normally the noisiest at the table. That's not saying all advisors are bad. There's some amazing advisors and Neds and chairs around that I run into regularly as well.
And the other thing that you mentioned, which I think is worth pulling out, is there's no one size fits all. So, someone might be great in one business, but not great for your business. Just because they were good at company X, they're not right in company Y.
100%. Like I know where to steer clear of. Somebody was asking me if I could help out with some medtech companies. I know nothing about the medical technology space. I'd be the worst person for that. Similarly, if people want to do sort of business to consumer, I'm like, that's not me. I'll give you such generic advice that it'd be you don't want to take any of that. So I think you've got to be honest if you're providing advice to people. What's your niche?
But that's the confidence, isn't it? When you're really good at something, you're good at being able to say, I'm not good at other things. If people are generic, they'll just hook on everything that they can possibly get. And I think that, I was taught this at a very young age, is the power of saying no. Yeah. Know what you're good at and don't try and blag your way through the things that you're not. Yeah,
I just think it's a necessity for me, which is I don't want to be found out or rumbled for something I'm not. I mean, there's a horrible feeling in there if you like, particularly in the power of an advisor, or even on the investment side, if you're giving people advice and then they question you on it and you've got no substance. I mean, the thought of that makes my toes curl up inside my shoes. If they go, how have you arrived at that conclusion, Martin? And I go, I saw somebody on Silicon Valley talking about it last week. That'd be a good idea.
Sadly, we see too much of that, though. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the sad truth. Is you do see a lot of that at the moment.
You talked about the value of your network, but also about events for finding new companies, which brings us to Climb.
Yes.
You've been to Climb.
I love Climb.
How important are these events, and in the north of England, for a company like yours?
Massively. So before we come on to sort of Climb, it's like the old adage, isn't it? And I love the saying, whoever coined it, that the sort of harder you play, the luckier you get, or the more you practice, the luckier you get, and all the rest of it. Networks are amazing things that are massively underestimated. There's always somebody can help you with something that's probably only one step removed. And the best way, in my experience and in my career, to build a network and actually get the answers that you're looking for, find the people, is by being at events. Now, not all events were created equal. So I've been to big events where you just wander around lost for 2 days looking at stands that all look the same, and you come away going, well, that's a waste of time. But events like Climb are brilliant because I think you've got first of all, you've got like a really well-defined ICP, ideal customer profile there. So you have a room full of people who are typically at the similar stage of growth as businesses, mixed with investors and people that can help. So it's just like perfect. It's like the perfect speed dating event. It's the right size because it's got intimacy for some of the sort of smaller sessions you do. It's got the sort of bigger sessions as well. And it is just brilliant for the region. Not just saying this, it's my favourite event that's gone in the north of the UK. It's really cool.
You just kind of made me fill up with emotion there. It is, but that is a post. It is. It was then built to solve a problem because we nicked everyone else's ideas. We went to all the big events and nicked the good things that were in each one, and then wrote off the the things that weren't good. And the idea was it was all about building those connections and network. Yeah, we have really cool content to get people there, but everything we do is about how do you get people to connect in the right way. Because it's hard, isn't it, being at a big event? I hate going to them, to be honest. That's why we built our own, because you can just come away after 3 days and have got no value from
substance.
it.
You've got a load of business cards and you're looking at them going, I don't remember any of these people. Like, what
Absolutely.
And as you know, I'm going to tell the story briefly, but as you know, at sort of Climb 23,
The very first one.
the very first one, I struck gold. I was stood outside having a conversation with somebody who I'd not met in person before, and he met through video, saw me on the car park. I went over, and as I was chatting to him, somebody else wandered over and was stood waiting to speak to the person I was talking to, and I just turned around and said, "Hi, I'm Martin. Who are you?" He said, "I'm James. What do you do, James?" "I run a business called Autonomo," and our friendship began, and we invested in Autonomo, which is an amazing autonomous retail store company. We would not have met had it not been for the power of Climb.
And just going back to that story, just when you had that first conversation, given the experience you've had and everything, is there also with you a gut instinct?
100%.
And something that just you just go, this excites me.
I think one thing I've learned over the years is really trust your gut and move quickly. So if your gut's telling you something really strong, don't deliberate, go for it. And that's always worked really well for me from meeting companies we've gone on to invest in at River. I normally have a very, very strong inkling. Sometimes it gets overturned. Sometimes, when we do a lot more diligence, we end up sort of saying, actually, it isn't what we thought it was. But more often than not, the gut is a good barometer. I remember, again, another embarrassing story that I'm happy to share. I was working in a company, and we were looking for a new head of sales. And this person came in for an interview. This person's called Robbie, and he's great. And I'd never met him before, and he was talking to our CEO, and I just watched the interaction for a couple of minutes, and I just got this overwhelming gut feel that, this guy's the person we've been after. And as we walked towards each other to shake hands, I said, I think we're past that stage, and I hugged him really tightly. And thinking back, it was like probably one of the weirdest things I've done, but the gut was right. And he turned out to be an absolute superstar, and he's now Chief Commercial Officer at Fuzzy Labs in Manchester, doing a great job.
Amazing. Just go back a little bit. So to that initial meeting with James, or that first conversation with anybody, I think people come out of accelerators and they do pitch days or do whatever. In that first conversation, how does it go? You meet somebody. I'm not suggesting always in a car park, but you meet someone and they come and introduce themselves. What advice would you give to a founder meeting someone like yourself on that first interaction?
I'd say, in the words of Del Boy to Trigger, play it nice and cool, right? So don't overwhelm me with a million facts and figures.
Don't hug you mean?
Yeah, I don't mind being hugged. I don't mind being hugged. I'll hug the right people.
I can't wait to see this when you're going to be hugged all around the car park at Climb in the future.
But so what not to do is walk up to somebody like me and go, Hi, I'm Gordon. Let me tell you all about you. And a lot of people do that because they're probably a bit nervous. So just try and slow yourself down, first of all, and just straight away get to the problem you solve and why you're passionate about it. Don't start wandering into how you do it, because I couldn't care less. And with James, he got a little bit lucky because I'd been over in the US in Chicago, and I'd been and experienced the Amazon Go stores, which is a very similar concept to what James was building. And ever since I went in there, I couldn't stop thinking, why has this technology not gone mainstream? It's just absolutely brilliant. And it had been in my head for a while. So I met James, who's very polished, and did the thing I said. Hi, I'm James. I'm the CEO of Autonomo. Pause, stop. Okay, James, what does Autonomo do? And I was like, wow, I'm hooked. Yeah, great.
Now, I did notice that you've become an interim chair again of a company. Is this because you're not busy enough? Have you not got enough to do? Or do you just want to keep your hand in?
So first of all, well, thanks for noticing. I'm
not stalking you. I promise you, it's homework.
I'm an absolute sucker for great people and great businesses. And I find it very, very hard to not be attracted like a moth to a light. And Hyperfinity are that business, and the founding team of 4 is just fantastic. So when I met them 2 years ago now, I was like, there's something really good here. I'd like to understand and help. So I've been working with them in the background for a couple of years on the sort of growth advisory side. But a key component to their next journey for scale was funding. So we worked together to try and help them where possible on like funding options. And thankfully, one of those solutions to the funding options was River Capital. We've invested alongside Anticus, who are a Leeds-based VC. And the opportunity came up to be a bit more involved. And we were like, what would you, a bit like the VC call I had in 23. And it was like, would you consider, yep. I don't know what the terms are. Yeah, I'm in. Yeah, I'd love to be more involved. So that's where we find ourselves today. And the reason the interim role's on there is we both felt that, back to be careful who you take advice from, and not all advice is equal, and not all chairs are equal. Let's just give it 6 months, make sure we like this, make sure we can, I can add value, that we get on in this capacity, and go from there. And if we don't, we'll shake hands and still be great friends.
Did you also, though, want to keep that excitement? I mean, you when you just listen to your story, there is that just excitement almost of the ground level, that beginning bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm hoping this is going to be like my perfect role, because I get enough of the excitement of the action without having to do all the hard work. And that's kind of how it was pitched to me by Pete, the CEO. He said, this will allow you to dabble in all the things you really enjoy, but without having the sort of burden day to day. So that's the dream anyway.
I love Pete. He spoke at at our first climb as well. Actually, he's great at convincing people to do stuff. And just again for our listeners, because I think it's hugely valuable that people often don't know what a chair does. And they'll just hire their mates. I'm trying to find out. Oh, right, okay.
No, I'm kidding. So it's an interesting one, this, because if you sort of go by the letter of the description, you're kind of there to govern the board and provide assistance to the board and founding team to develop them from a coaching and provide sort of strategic advice. I'm probably missing a few bits and pieces out of there. I want to kind of try and rewrite that sort of job description responsibilities a little bit, because I've worked with some chairs who are very hands off, that turn up sort of once a month and they give their 5 minutes of gold and then they disappear again. From that's not how I operate or want to operate. So my view on it is I want to be like a firm part of the team. I'm actually a lot more involved than probably a traditional chair should be. I like to join and sit in meetings that a chair wouldn't, like the exec team meeting, for example. I like to run sessions for the team when they need help, and just be an extra sort of pair of hands, brain to the founding team, really. And the other thing that I'm really loving at the minute, although it's early days, is bringing in people who've got way more experience than me to help the team in certain ways. Back to the network. In fact, I've got a call tomorrow with a former customer that I met 20 years ago, that I've kept in contact with, who's on the board of a very large company that I think will be potentially a really amazing strategic advisor for Hyper. So it's being able to do that. It's about using your network and bringing some expertise to the founders, I guess.
And is there any challenge that you're the chair and also the investor? Is that going to cause you any challenges, or?
So it's a great question, actually, and we had to debate that amongst River, myself, and Hyper, because it's not a usual way to do it. But the way in which I think we've all agreed to do it is I'll represent Hyper, and so there's no conflict, and so it's really clean. And if there's any sort of internal discussions at River that I would normally be part of where we think there could be a conflict, I'll just be excluded from those discussions.
I think there's also an important difference here, is that you're an operator and have come from business, not your standard finance, corporate finance background into VC going on the board. Yeah. So I think, again, just for our listeners, is that it is a different scenario. Sometimes we do see where an investor will plonk themselves on the board and not add any value because they've never run a business.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm hoping that's the case, and there is some, like so River have a board seat, as do Anticus, and so that's Anne and David at River and Anticus, and they're brilliant because they bring that sort of strong financial expertise as well as David's CTO skills, which are things that I would say I'm weaker at. So I think as long as you've got the right people around the table, as the chair, you don't have to have all the answers to everything.
Martin, just before we end, I sort of wanted to bring you back full circle. You talked about having a passion for problem solving.
Yes.
And is that, when you look back at all the things, despite not having a plan, was it perhaps the steps in between were always problem solving?
Yeah, I think so. And I like to be slightly out of my depth. I think that brings out the best in me and probably most people. I've always felt that, once you can feel the bottom of the pool, it's probably time to get in a deeper pool. So yeah, mixture of trying to solve problems, help really good people where you think you can help, and be slightly out of your own depth. I think it's a good combination.
Interesting lessons for life, that one.
Yeah.
And it would be remiss of me not to let you do this, but, River Capital, you are actively investing. You've got great funds. What
Yes.
do you look for in businesses, and how do people connect with you?
Yeah. So we're actively looking for companies in the north of the UK. So it's quite broad, sort of from Birmingham upwards is kind of our remit. That includes all of Scotland and Northern Ireland. We're looking for seed stage companies that are in revenue, that are developing AI, which is probably the whole world at the moment, but wasn't back in 23. So using AI to solve business problems. We have a preference for B2B, although we do have a couple of B2C companies in our portfolio. And that's about it. It's quite a broad spectrum. We don't shy away from any specific industries. We're not drawn to others. Our portfolio's got quite a mixed bag now of different industries. But we just want to find teams of founders that are solving important problems, and they've got strong founder market fit, i.e. they've come from an industry where they know this problem exists and they're there to fix it. And if they're doing that and they're in revenue and they're in the north and they're developing AI, they should come and talk to us. However you want to give out contact details, but yeah, I'm always around to take those calls or intros.
Martin, thank you so much for your time. Here's to problem solving and being out of your depth.
Yeah.
I hope the pool doesn't get too deep. Or get an oxygen tank if you're really going for it.
Thanks very much.
Join us again for Conversations at the Summit.